Picture a place where the horizon never ends, where you can stand on your porch at dawn and see nothing but grass in every direction. Tall grass, endless grass, grass that moves like water when the wind rolls across the land.
This is
Now add
all we
hope,
have.
real
Let's
hope,
get it back.
the dangerous kind. The kind that makes a 23-year-old man leave everything he knows and walk into emptiness with nothing but a piece of paper that says, "This land is yours." Add families building houses out of dirt because there are no trees. Add former slaves tasting freedom for the first time and realizing it comes with no safety net. Add danger. White settlers nearby who don't believe black people should own land. Tornadoes that erase months of work in seconds. Winters so cold your water freezes inside your house. And underneath it all, add this, the quiet, stubborn decision to build something that nobody can take away. This is Langston, Oklahoma territory. April 18th, 1891. The first town in America built, governed, and run entirely by black Americans. A place where the mayor is black, the sheriff is black, the teacher is black, and every person walking down the dirt main street owns their own future. My name is Henry. If you're new here and you enjoy slow, immersive history like this, go ahead and subscribe. And get comfortable. Here we go. The first thing that pulls you from sleep isn't sound. It's temperature. The air against your face has changed. You've been asleep for maybe 5 hours, and in that time, the Oklahoma night has done what it always does, drop 20 degrees, pulling the heat out of everything it touches. Your thin blanket isn't enough. It's never enough, but it's all you have. You don't open your eyes yet. You're not ready. Your body is still heavy with exhaustion from yesterday's work. 10 hours behind a plow that fought you every step, turning prairie sod that's never been broken. Grass roots so thick and tangled they could stop a knife. Your shoulders, it ache. Your hands are blistered even through the calluses you've built up over 8 months. But you can't stay in bed. The sun doesn't care if you're tired. Then the smell reaches you, and you're fully awake whether you want to be or not. It's not just one smell, it's layers. The way everything is layers out here on the prairie. Earth. That's the first thing. Your walls are made from it. Sod bricks cut from the prairie itself, each brick about 3 feet long and 18 inches wide, stacked up like masonry with the grass side down and the root side holding everything together. The smell is rich and loamy, like walking through a freshly plowed field, because that's essentially what you're sleeping inside. A field that someone shaped into walls. Wood smoke comes next. You kept a fire going in the small iron stove last night. Not for warmth, April nights aren't that cold yet, but to cook your supper of cornmeal mush and to boil water, because drinking prairie water without boiling it first is a good way to spend 3 days wishing you were dead. The smoke has seeped into everything. Your clothes, your blanket, your hair. It's not unpleasant, actually. It's the smell of survival. Dried grass. Your mattress is a cotton tick, a large sack basically that you stuffed with prairie grass last October when you first arrived. You gathered it yourself, cutting armfuls of the tall blue stem, an Indian grass that grows everywhere, letting it dry for a week in the sun, then cramming it into the tick until it was full enough to sleep on. It's lumpy and it rustles every time you move, but it's better than sleeping on the ground. The grass has a sweet, dusty smell that reminds you of hay, except hay is something people make on purpose. This is just grass you cut because you couldn't afford anything else. Sweat, your own sweat. Even in April, even at dawn when it's cold, you're sweating. That's what 8 months of physical labor does. Your body doesn't know how to stop anymore. And bathing, real bathing with enough water to actually get clean, is a luxury you allow yourself maybe once a week. Water is too precious. You need it for drinking, for cooking, for your vegetable garden, for the livestock you don't have yet, but hope to buy. Washing your whole body seems wasteful when you're just going to get dirty again in an hour. Boiled water. There's a faint metallic tang in the air from the water you boiled last night. Prairie water carries minerals, silt, things you don't think about too hard. It comes up from the town, well, 80 feet down, and even after boiling it has a taste. Not bad exactly. Just different from anything you ever drank in Mississippi. Old cooking grease. The smell of yesterday's salt pork lingers in the air mixed with the cornmeal you cooked. It's a greasy, fatty smell that makes your stomach growl, even though you're not sure if it's hunger or nausea. And underneath everything else, there's a smell you didn't know existed until you came to Oklahoma. It's the smell of space, of emptiness, of air that has traveled 100 miles without touching a tree or a building or anything except grass and sky. It's clean in a way that makes you understand how dirty everything back in Mississippi was. The air there was thick with humidity, with the smell of cotton, processing with smoke from too many cook fires in too small a space, with a particular staleness that comes from too many people living on top of each other with no escape. Here the air moves. It doesn't sit and rot. It flows across the prairie like water, and it carries the scent of distance with it. You open your eyes. Darkness almost complete. The single window in your soddy, and it's not really a window. It's just a hole in the wall covered with oiled cloth, because glass costs money you don't have, lets in the barest gray light of pre-dawn. You can see the outline of the door, the darker shapes of your table and chairs, the glint of the water bucket on its shelf, that's all. Your name is Josiah Freeman. You're 23 years old. You were born enslaved in Mississippi in 1868, freed when you were 2 years old by the 13th Amendment, and you've spent every day of your life since then being reminded by white people that freedom is just a word on paper. You arrived in Langston 8 months ago in August of 1890 with $42.30 in gold coins that you'd saved over 5 years working as a field hand in Yazoo County. You also brought a steel plow blade that had belonged to your grandfather, who got it from a white farmer he worked for and kept it hidden for 20 years because owning farming equipment was one of the things that could get you killed if the wrong white person noticed. And you brought a piece of paper from the United States Land Office that says you are the legal owner of 40 acres of land in Logan County, Oklahoma Territory. 40 acres. The government gave it to you for free. Under the Homestead Act of 1862, any citizen, and yes, black people are citizens. Now, even if half the country acts like they're not, can claim up to 160 acres of public land. All you have to do is live on it for 5 years, make improvements, and it's yours forever. No rent, no sharecropping, no white landlord who can evict you whenever he feels like it. Back in Mississippi, everyone said Oklahoma would kill you. Your mother said it, your uncle said it, the preacher at your church said it. They said the land was cursed, that nothing would grow, that you'd starve or freeze or get killed by Indians or tornadoes. They weren't entirely wrong about some of that, but nobody's killed you yet. And every day you wake up on land that belongs to you is a day you've won. The window cloth is starting to glow slightly. Dawn is coming. You can hear wind outside. There's always wind in Oklahoma. Always. Sometimes it's a gentle breeze that makes the grass whisper like water. Sometimes it's a howling monster that tears roofs off buildings and sends tumbleweeds the size of wagons rolling across the prairie. This morning it's somewhere in between. Steady, persistent, strong enough that you can hear it even through the thick sod walls. No birds yet. Too early. But in another 30 minutes, the meadowlarks will start up with their clear floating calls, and then the prairie will fill with sound. Meadowlarks crows the occasional hawk screaming as it circles overhead, looking for rabbits or prairie dogs. Out here, the wildlife wakes up early because the ones who don't get eaten. You need to get up. The earthen floor is cool under your bare feet when you swing out of bed. Not cold like it will be in December when you'll have to break ice inside your water bucket just to wash your face, but cool enough to shock you fully awake. You're wearing the clothes you slept in. That's normal. Most people do. You own 2 sets of clothes, total the ones you're wearing, and your Sunday outfit that stays in the trunk unless you're going to church or town meeting. You splash water on your face from the basin. The water is cold and slightly brown despite having been drawn from the well yesterday. That's normal too. Prairie water carries silt minerals, things you don't think about too hard. You boil it before drinking, but you can't boil enough for washing. So you wash in cold water that tastes like dirt and hope you don't get sick. You got this water yesterday evening from the town, well on Main Street, half a mile west of here. You carried it back in a wooden bucket, walking carefully so you wouldn't spill, because every drop matters. The well is 80 feet deep, dug by hand last summer, by a crew of men who took turns going down with shovels and buckets, working in shifts, lowering each other down and pulling up the dirt one bucket at a time until they hit water. It took them 6 weeks. The water comes up sweet and clean, better than anything you ever tasted in Mississippi, but it doesn't come to your house. There are no pipes out here, no infrastructure, no systems. You fetch water bucket by bucket from the town well or from the creek 3 miles east, and you make it last as long as you can. You drink a cup of water standing by the window looking out at the gray prairie. You're 40 acres. The thought still gives you a physical sensation in your chest. Something between pride and fear and disbelief. 40 acres of land that belongs to you, not to a white landlord, not to a sharecropping boss. To you. Most of it is still prairie. Unbroken grassland that's never felt a plow, covered with big bluestem and Indian grass and dozens of other species you don't know the names of. The grass out there is tall, 5 or 6 feet in places, and so thick you can barely walk through it without a machete or a scythe. It's beautiful in its own way, especially when the wind blows and the whole prairie moves like a living thing. But you can't eat grass, you need cropland. Closest to the Saudi, you've got about 8 acres broken and ready for planting. 8 acres that you turned yourself last fall with that steel plow blade and a borrowed mule walking behind the plow for 12-hour days until your hands bled and your back felt like it would snap. The work almost killed you. Breaking prairie sod is nothing like plowing a field back in Mississippi. Let me tell you exactly how you learn to do this because the technique matters. The technique is everything. The plow blade is 18 inches of curved steel, just the blade, not the whole plow. It's a triangle of metal sharpened on one edge with a socket where it attaches to the wooden handle. Your grandfather hid this blade for 20 years. He got it from a white farmer he worked for in Mississippi sometime in the 1850s. The farmer was getting rid of old equipment, and your grandfather managed to take this blade without anyone noticing. He kept it hidden, buried in the woods behind his cabin, wrapped in oilcloth. Because owning farming equipment was one of those things that could get a slave killed if the wrong person found out. After emancipation, he dug it up and started using it to farm the small plot of land he sharecropped. When he died, your father inherited it. When you left for Oklahoma, your father pressed it into your hands. "This is the only thing of value I have to give you," he said. "Use it well." You've used it to break 8 acres of virgin prairie. The handle you made yourself from a cottonwood branch you cut down by the creek, shaping it over several days with a knife and a rasp until it fit your hands. Cottonwood is soft wood, not ideal, but it's all that grows out here. The first handle split after 3 days. The second one cracked after a week. The third one, the one you're using now, has held up for 5 months. To break prairie sod, you need a mule. You don't own one. They cost $60 and you don't have $60. So you borrowed one from Amos Collier, your neighbor to the north, in exchange for 2 days of labor on his land. That's how things work out here. You trade work, you trade tools, you trade knowledge. Money is scarce, but labor you can always give. The technique: you hitch the mule to the plow. You walk behind it holding the handles, keeping the blade angled at 45 degrees to the ground. Not 90 degrees straight down, that'll just bounce off the sod mat. 45 degrees so the blade can slide under the roots and lift the whole thing up. You walk. The mow pulls. The blade cuts. A ribbon of sod 3 feet wide and 6 inches thick peels up behind you like a long brown carpet. Grass on top, roots, and black soil underneath. You walk for 12 hours. When your hands start to bleed, you wrap them in cloth and keep going. When your back starts to scream, you straighten up for 30 seconds and then bend back to the plow. When the mule gets tired, you let it rest for 10 minutes and then start again. You do this for 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, you have 8 acres of turned earth. The grass that's been growing there for thousands of years is now upside-down roots exposed to the sun, dying. In a few weeks, those roots will rot and become part of the soil. Rich, black, fertile soil that's never grown anything but grass. That's the theory anyway. You broke those 8 acres in October when you first arrived. Now it's April and the soil has settled through the winter. It's ready for planting. The furrows are visible in the growing light. Straight lines running east to west, the direction the wind blows strongest, so the corn stalks will support each other instead of all falling the same way when the summer storms hit. You learned that from Obadiah Crane, your neighbor to the west. Obadiah is 56 years old. He's been farming for 40 years and knows things about soil and weather and crops that you're still trying to absorb. He has 80 acres because he claimed a double allotment as the head of a family. His soddy is bigger than yours, 2 rooms instead of 1, and he's got a wife and 5 children helping him work the land. A mile north, Amos Collier has his 40 acres and 3 children. 2 miles south, the Johnsons, the Smiths, the Williams family, all of them black, all of them free, all of them building something. Beyond the claimed land, there's still open prairie. Thousands of acres waiting for the next wave of settlers. The land run of 1889 opened up this whole area to homesteading, and people are still coming. Not as many as came in that first rush. You've heard the stories about thousands of people racing across the prairie on horseback, staking claims, fighting over the best land, but there's still a steady trickle. Every month, new families arrive in Langston. New soddies appear on the horizon. New fields get broken. The government wants this land settled, wants it turned from wilderness into farms and towns and productive territory that can eventually become a state. They're practically giving it away. Free land for anyone willing to work it. Of course, anyone mostly means white people. Most of Oklahoma Territory is being settled by white farmers from Kansas and Missouri and Arkansas. But there are places like here, like Langston, where black folks have carved out their own space. Edward P. McCabe made sure of that. He's the man who founded Langston, who surveyed the town, who lobbied the territorial government to allow black settlement, who published pamphlets all over the South advertising Oklahoma as a place where black people could own land and govern themselves. You've got one of those pamphlets in your trunk. Come to Oklahoma Territory, it says. Own your own land. Build your own future. Be truly free for the first time in your life. It sounded too good to be true. You came anyway. Your clothes are where you left them last night, draped over one of the chairs. A cotton shirt, rough and undyed because dye costs money. Canvas trousers patched in two places, held up with a rope belt that your mother braided before you left Mississippi. The belt is one of the few things you have that she touched with her own hands. Sometimes you run your fingers over it and think about her sitting in the cabin doorway, braiding the rope by lamplight, not saying anything but crying quietly because you were leaving, and she knew she'd probably never see you again. You haven't seen her in 8 months. You've written 3 letters. You don't know if she got them. The postal service out here is unreliable at best. Your boots sit by the door. Heavy leather things you bought used in Guthrie for $3. They're too big. You needed a size 9 and these are size 10, but you stuffed the toes with rags and they work well enough. The soles are wearing thin. You'll need to get them resoled before winter, which means another trip to Guthrie, which means money you don't have yet. No socks. You don't own socks. Socks cost money and wear out fast, and you've decided to do without them until you can afford to waste money on something that isn't food or seed or tools. You button your shirt. Pull on your trousers. Tie the rope belt. Your mother's hands on that rope. You put on your boots and step outside into the morning. The wind hits you like a physical force. Out here without trees to block it, wind is a constant presence. It's not like Mississippi where wind was something that happened occasionally, usually before a storm. In Oklahoma, wind is the default state of the atmosphere. The air is always moving and always flowing from somewhere to somewhere else, and you're just standing in the middle of its path. This morning it's coming from the south, steady and cool, carrying the smell of grass and distant rain and something else you can't quite identify. The smell of space, maybe, of emptiness, of miles and miles of nothing but prairie between you and whatever weather is building on the horizon. The sky is clear overhead, that particular shade of pale blue that means the sun is about to rise but dark in the south. Storm clouds, maybe, or just the normal darkness of the far horizon. You've learned not to trust Oklahoma weather. It can be clear and calm at dawn and raining sideways by noon. It can be 70 degrees one day and snowing the next. The weather here has no respect for your plans. Your soddy sits on a slight rise in the land. You wouldn't even call it a hill, just a gentle swell in the prairie, maybe 10 or 15 feet higher than the surrounding area. But it's enough to keep you from flooding when the heavy rains come, and it gives you a view. Not much of a view by Mississippi standards, where there were always trees or buildings or something to look at. Out here, the view is just more prairie, grass stretching away in every direction, broken only by the occasional soddy or fence line or distant figure of a farmer checking his stock. But you can see Langston from here. Half a mile to the west, the town rises out of the prairie like an island in an ocean of grass. It's not much to look at, honestly. A scattering of buildings, most of them low and brown, because they're made from sod like your house. A few timber structures that stand out because of their vertical lines and their slightly less earthy color. From this distance, the whole town looks like it could blow away in a strong wind. But right in the middle, dominating everything else, is the schoolhouse. You can see it clearly from your doorway. Even at this distance, half a mile, maybe a bit more, the schoolhouse stands out because it's the tallest building in town. 2 stories of white painted timber with a bell tower on top and real glass windows that catch the early light and gleam like promises. The schoolhouse is the pride of Langston, heart of the town, the physical representation of everything this place is trying to be. You find yourself walking toward it without really deciding to. The cornfield can wait another 30 minutes. You need to see it up close again, the way you've seen it up close every few days since you arrived, just to remind yourself it's real. The walk to town takes 15 minutes at a steady pace. The path isn't really a path, it's just a worn track through the grass, where people have walked enough times that the vegetation has given up trying to grow. In the rainy season, it turns to mud. In the dry season, it's hard-packed dirt with deep ruts from wagon wheels. This morning, the ground is firm. Easy walking. Other people are moving in the morning, too. You can see them in the distance. Dark figures against the pale grass heading toward their fields, or toward town, or toward whatever tasks make up their day. A woman hanging laundry outside her soddy, 2 children driving a milk cow toward the creek. A man loading fence posts into a wagon. Everyone waves. You wave back. That's one of the things about Langston that's different from Mississippi. In Mississippi, black people didn't acknowledge each other in public if white people were watching. You kept your head down, minded your business didn't draw attention. Out here, every black face you see is a neighbor, an ally, someone who's fighting the same fight you are. So you wave, you nod, you exchange a word of greeting, even if you're strangers, because you're all in this together. Langston appears ahead of you, growing larger with each step. From a distance, it looks small. Up close, it's still small, but in a more immediate way. You can see the individual buildings now, the details. Main Street runs east-west through the center of town, maybe 300 feet long, unpaved, just dirt worn smooth by foot traffic and wagon wheels. Buildings line both sides. General store, post office, newspaper office, hotel, blacksmith, livery stable, doctor's office, church. Most of them are single-story sod structures that squat close to the ground like they're trying not to be noticed. A few are timber-framed, their boards already weathering gray in the sun and wind. But at the east end of Main Street, impossible to miss, is the schoolhouse. You stop walking when you reach it. You do this every time. You can't help it. The schoolhouse is beautiful. That's the only word for it. In a town of dirt and mud and rough construction, the schoolhouse is a work of art. It's 2 stories tall, built from milled lumber that was shipped in from Kansas at enormous expense. The wood is painted white, actual white paint, not whitewash, which cost real money. The windows are real glass, not oiled cloth. There are 6 windows on each floor, evenly spaced, and they gleam in the morning light like eyes looking out at the prairie. The bell tower rises another 15 feet above the roof, topped with a small dome and a weather vane in the shape of a rooster. The bell itself, you can't see it from here, but you know it's there is real brass donated by a black church in Kansas City. It weighs 200 pounds and can be heard for 3 miles when someone rings it with enthusiasm. This building cost $640 to construct. Every penny was raised by the residents of Langston. Some families donated $25, some donated 25 cents. But everyone donated something because the schoolhouse represents more than just a place for children to learn. It represents the whole point of this town, education. That's what Edward McCabe says. That's what the newspaper says. That's what every speech at every town meeting emphasizes. If black folks are going to prove they deserve equality, they need to be educated. They need to read and write and do mathematics and know history and science and all the things that white people use as excuses to call black people inferior. The schoolhouse has 2 rooms inside, one for younger children, one for older. It has real desks, not just benches. It has a chalkboard. It has books. Not many, maybe 30 or 40 total, but that's 30 or 40 more than most black children in the South will ever see. Children come to this school from 20 miles away. Families who don't even live in Langston proper, who are scattered across the prairie in their own soddies and farms, bring their children here because it's the only school in the territory that will educate black children past the 3rd grade. White schools won't take them. White schools in the surrounding townships, Mulhall and Orlando and Coyle, have policies sometimes written, sometimes just understood that black children aren't welcome. Oh, they won't say it that directly. They'll say there's no room or that the child isn't qualified or that the parents need to pay a special fee that just happens to be more than any black family can afford. But Langston School is different. Langston School is for everyone. If you're black and you want your child to learn, you bring them here. The building was completed 2 months ago in February of 1891. You were there the day they raised the bell tower. The whole town turned out to watch. Men formed a human chain, passing up the sections of the tower one piece at a time, fitting them together while the women cooked food and the children ran around in circles with that particular wild energy of kids who know something important is happening, even if they don't understand what. When the bell was finally mounted and someone rang it for the first time, people cried. Actual tears running down faces of men and women who'd seen too much in their lives to cry easily. Because that bell meant something. It meant permanence. It meant commitment. It meant that Langston wasn't just a collection of desperate people squatting on the prairie. It was a real town with real institutions and a real future. You stand there looking at the schoolhouse for a long moment, the same way you always do. The men who built this were still alive when you were born. Some of them are your neighbors. Obadiah Crane helped frame the walls. Amos Collier donated lumber. The carpenter who oversaw construction, a man named Thomas Redding, lives 3 streets over in a soddy not much different from yours. This isn't ancient history, this is recent. This is real and it's yours, not in the sense that you own it. The town owns it collectively. but in the sense that you're part of the community that built it. You donated $2 toward construction, $2 you couldn't really afford, but gave anyway. Because what else were you going to do? Let the schoolhouse not get built because you wanted to keep your money. The sun breaks over the eastern horizon while you're standing there flooding the prairie with golden light. The schoolhouse windows catch the sun and blaze like fire. Birds you think they're crows circle the bell tower, their calls sharp and harsh in the morning air. You need to get back to your field. The corn won't plant itself and you're already behind schedule. But for just another moment, you stand there and look at the schoolhouse and think about what it represents. Your grandparents were slaves. They couldn't read or write. Teaching a slave to read was illegal in most states. Your grandfather was beaten once for being caught with a scrap of newspaper, not even reading it, just looking at the words trying to figure out what they meant. Your parents were born free, technically, but freedom didn't mean much in Mississippi in the 1870s and 80s. There were schools for black children, but they were so underfunded and overcrowded that most kids stopped going after a year or two. Your mother can read well enough to get through the Bible slowly. Your father never learned at all. You can read. Not well. You only had about 3 years of sporadic schooling before you had to start working full-time, but well enough to sign your name, to read a contract, to understand the land deed that says you own 40 acres. And if you have children someday, when you have children someday, because you're determined to make this work, to build a life here, they'll be able to attend this school. They'll learn mathematics and history and science. They'll read books you've never even heard of. They'll have opportunities you can't imagine. That's what the schoolhouse represents. Not just education, but progress. Advancement. The slow grinding work of building a future that's better than the past. You turn away finally and start walking back toward your field. The sun is fully up now, the prairie washed in morning light. It's going to be a hot day. You can already feel it in the air, that particular quality of heat that builds and builds until the afternoon is like walking through an oven. By the time you get back to your soddy, your stomach is reminding you that breakfast was not a thing that happened. You eat standing up. Cold cornmeal mush left over from last night, scooped directly from the pot with your fingers because washing a spoon seems like a waste of water. The mush is bland and gritty and fills your stomach without satisfying anything. Back in Mississippi, your mother would have made cornmeal mush with milk and a little sugar when she could get it. Out here, it's cornmeal and water cooked until it's thick enough to eat. That's it. It's enough. It keeps you alive. That's all that matters. You drink another cup of water, then pick up your tools and head to the field. You also need seed corn. You've got maybe 2 bushels worth sitting in cloth sacks inside the soddy. Corn you bought from Thaddeus Morton at the general store for $4 total, which was more than you wanted to spend, but the going rate for good seed. The corn is a variety called Oklahoma yellowbread, specifically for this climate. Short growing season, drought-resistant, decent yield if the weather cooperates. If. Everything in Oklahoma is if. If it rains enough, but not too much. If the wind doesn't shred your crops. If hail doesn't destroy everything in 15 minutes. If grasshoppers don't descend in clouds and eat every green thing in sight. If you don't break your leg or get bit by a rattlesnake or come down with pneumonia or any of the 100 other things that can kill you when the nearest doctor is 30 miles away. But you're going to plant anyway because what else are you going to do, starve? The field is waiting. 8 acres of dark earth, furrowed in rows running east to west. You did this work last fall, spent 2 weeks behind a borrowed mule breaking sod. Another week harrowing the turned earth to break up clods and smooth out the furrows. The soil here is rich, virgin prairie soil thick with organic matter from thousands of years of grass growing and dying and composting back into the earth. It's black and loamy and smells like life. The problem is keeping it in place. Without trees, without grass, prairie soil blows. You've seen it happen. Watch topsoil lift off fields and swirl into the air like black snow carried away by the relentless wind. Some farmers have lost entire crops to erosion before the seeds even sprouted. That's why you're planting corn in dense rows, 3 feet apart, seeds 1 foot apart within the rows, close enough that the stalks will hold the soil down with their roots, close enough that they'll support each other when the summer storms hit and try to flatten everything. You start at the western edge of the field. The technique is simple but exhausting. You use a pointed stick, just a sharpened branch, really to make a hole in the soil about 2 inches deep. Drop in 3 or 4 kernels of corn. Cover the hole with your boot. Move 1 foot down the row. Repeat. Over and over and over. Poke, drop, cover, move. Poke, drop, cover, move. The morning sun climbs higher. The temperature rises. You've been working for maybe an hour when you start sweating, and after 2 hours, your shirt is soaked through. The back of your neck burns despite your hat. Your hands are cramping from gripping the planting stick. Your back aches from bending over thousands of times. But you keep going. This is what farming is, not the romantic version where happy peasants sing while they work and everything is pastoral and beautiful. This is the real version. Exhaustion, repetition, pain. The slow grinding work of forcing the earth to give you something you can eat. Around mid-morning, you hear footsteps in the grass behind you. You turn, already reaching for the knife you keep in your belt. Out here, you never know. But it's just Obadiah Crane, your neighbor, walking slowly across the prairie toward your field. Obadiah is 56 years old, though he looks older. He's a big man, or he used to be before age and hard work wore him down. Now he's just tall, with shoulders that stoop slightly, and a limp he's developed over the winter from rheumatism in his left knee. His face is deeply lined, weathered by 60 years of life that started in slavery in Tennessee and has included more hardship than most people can imagine. But his eyes are sharp, alert, missing nothing. "Morning, Josiah," he calls when he's close enough. "Morning, Mr. Crane. Told you to call me Obadiah." "Yes, sir." He grins, shakes his head. "You've had this conversation before." Obadiah doesn't care about formality, but you were raised to show respect to your elders, and some habits are hard to break. Obadiah stops at the edge of your field, looking at the rows you've already planted. He squats down slowly, favoring that bad knee, and examines the soil, rubbing some of it between his fingers. "Good depth," he says, "not too deep, not too shallow. Soil's still got moisture from last week's rain. Planning to finish today if I can." "You won't." He says it matter-of-factly, not mean, just stating reality. 8 acres is 2 days' work for one man minimum. 3 if you want to do it right and not cripple yourself. You know he's right, but admitting it feels like failure. "I've got a rhythm going." "Rhythm doesn't matter if you can't walk tomorrow." Obadiah stands up, wincing as his knee pops. "Take breaks. Drink water. This field isn't going anywhere." He's quiet for a moment, looking out at the prairie. Then, "Wanted to ask if you'd help with my north field on Friday. Need to get it turned before next week. I'll trade you a day's work for a day's work." This is how it works in Langston. Nobody has money, or almost nobody, so you trade labor. You help your neighbor plow, and next week he helps you build a fence. You help him dig a well, and he helps you repair your roof. It's the only way to survive out here. "Friday works," you say. "Good. Bring your plow blade. Mine's getting dull, and I haven't had time to sharpen it." He starts to turn away, then pauses. "Oh, town meeting tonight. Sunset at the schoolhouse. McCabe's supposed to be there." Edward P. McCabe, the founder of Langston, the man who made all this possible. He's a legend, and he is rarely in town anymore, too busy in Guthrie, the territorial capital, trying to convince the legislature to make Oklahoma a state where black folks have equal rights. "What's the meeting about?" you ask. Obadiah's face darkens. "Trouble in Mulhall. White settlers giving grief to some of our folks who went over there to trade. McCabe wants to talk about what we're going to do about it." Mulhall, the nearest white town about 12 miles northwest. You've never been there. You do all your trading in Guthrie or right here in Langston. But you've heard stories. "I'll be there," you say. Obadiah nods, but he doesn't leave. He stands there for a moment, looking at you with an expression you can't quite read. "You know, Josiah," he says finally, "when I was your age, I couldn't read a single word. Couldn't write my own name. It was illegal, you understand. They'd beat you for it. Or worse. You didn't know this." Obadiah has never talked about his past before, not in detail. "My master had a daughter," he continues. "She was maybe 8 years old. Sweet girl. She used to practice her letters on a slate in the kitchen while I was working. One day she saw me watching and she said, 'You want to learn, Obadiah?'" He pauses. "She taught me. Every day for 2 years while her father was out in the field, she taught me to read. We both knew what would happen if we got caught, but she did it anyway." "What happened to her?" you ask. "Don't know. War came, everything changed. I ran north when I got the chance. Never saw her again." He looks at the schoolhouse in the distance, visible even from here. "That's why I helped build that," he says. "That's why I gave money I didn't have. Because that little girl risked everything to teach one slave to read. And now we've got a whole building where any black child can learn, where it's not illegal, where it's not dangerous, where it's expected." He meets your eyes. You donated $2 to that building. You think it's not much, but it's everything. It's the difference between the world I grew up in and the world we're making here. He turns and walks away, that limp making him rock slightly, with each step leaving you standing in your field with a planting stick in your hand and tears you didn't expect burning in your eyes. You watch him go. A man who survived slavery, survived the war, survived decades of violence and poverty and struggle, and still had the courage to come out here and claim land and build something new. A man who was taught to read in secret by a child who knew the risks. A man who's teaching you now in his own way what it means to be free. If Obadiah can do it, you can do it. You turn back to your field and keep planting. Poke, drop, cover, move. The sun climbs higher, the day gets hotter. Sweat runs into your eyes, stings, makes you blink. Your water bucket is sitting at the edge of the field, and you force yourself to walk over and drink every hour or so following Obadiah's advice, even though it feels like wasting time. The field stretches out ahead of you, rows and rows still to plant. The work is endless, but slowly, so slowly you almost don't notice you're making progress. One seed at a time, 1 foot at a time, 1 row at a time. By noon, you've planted maybe 2 acres. 6 more to go. Your back is screaming. Your hands are blistered even through the calluses. Your legs are shaking from the constant squatting and standing. But 2 acres of corn are in the ground. 2 acres that will grow if the weather cooperates, if the insects don't destroy them, if 100 other things don't go wrong. Into food that will keep you alive next winter. That's worth some pain. Let me tell you what you're thinking about while you work, because the physical repetition leaves your mind free to wander. You're thinking about money. You arrived here with $42.30. You've spent most of it. Seed corn, $4. Borrowing the mule last fall to break sod, that was 2 days of labor, which if you were paying wages would have been worth about $3. The plow handles you made yourself, so that cost nothing except time. Donation to the schoolhouse, $2. Your current cash on hand, $1.15. That's it. That's everything you have in the world. You need to make this corn harvest work, because if it doesn't, you're ruined. You'll have no income, no way to buy supplies for next year, no way to eat through the winter. The calculation is automatic, something you do without thinking, the same way you calculate rows and seed spacing. If everything goes right, if the weather cooperates, if the insects stay away, if disease doesn't strike, you should get about 30 bushels of corn per acre from these 8 acres. 8 acres times 30 bushels equals 240 bushels total. The market price for corn in Guthrie right now is about 40 cents per bushel. 240 bushels times 40 cents equals $96. Minus the $4 you spent on seed equals $92 net profit. $92. Back in Mississippi working as a field hand, you made about $45 a year. It took you 5 years to save $42. If this harvest works, you'll make more in 1 season than you made in 2 years back home, if you keep planting. The sun is directly overhead now, beating down with that particular Oklahoma intensity that makes the air shimmer and dance. There's no shade on the prairie, nowhere to escape. You just endure it. Around 1 in the afternoon, your stomach makes it very clear that cold cornmeal mush eaten 8 hours ago is no longer sufficient. You're out of food at the Saudi, completely out. You meant to go to the general store yesterday, but the field work took longer than expected, and by the time you finished, it was past dark and you just collapsed into bed. Now you're paying for it. You could keep working, push through until evening, finish another acre maybe. But Obadiah's words echo in your head. Rhythm doesn't matter if you can't walk tomorrow. You need to eat, which means you need to go to town. You clean the dirt off your hands as best you can, grab your hat, and start walking west toward Langston. The walk feels longer in the midday heat, the same path you took this morning, but the sun directly overhead makes it feel twice as far. The air shimmers. Your boots feel heavy. Each step takes conscious effort. But you keep going because what choice do you have? Main Street is quiet when you arrive. Most people are either in their fields working or inside their homes avoiding the heat. A few figures move in the distance. A woman sweeping her porch, a man loading supplies into a wagon. But compared to the bustling activity of morning, the town feels almost abandoned. The general store sits on the north side of Main Street, about halfway down. It's a sod building like most of the others, low and brown, with a hand-painted sign above the door that reads, Morton's General Store, T. Morton Proprietor. Thaddeus Morton runs the store with his wife Clara. They came from Alabama 6 months ago with a wagon full of trade goods and opened for business the week they arrived. The store is the commercial heart of Langston, the place where people buy everything they can't make or grow themselves. You push open the door and step inside. The store is dim. The windows are small, and it takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. But once they do, you can see it's packed with goods. Shelves line the walls, stacked with everything a frontier town needs. Sacks of flour and cornmeal, tins of coffee and tea, Bolts of fabric, spools of thread needles, buttons, soap candles, kerosene, rope nails, tools, medicine, tobacco, candy for children, though you've never bought any because candy is a luxury you can't justify, and guns. A rack of rifles and shotguns behind the counter because you never know when you might need one. Thaddeus is behind the counter writing in a ledger. He's a tall, thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles that sit crooked on his nose. He looks up when you enter. Josiah. Afternoon, Mr. Morton. What can I do for you? Need some cornmeal and salt pork if you have it. Got both. He closes the ledger and moves to the shelves. How much cornmeal you need? 5 pounds. He measures it out on a scale, pours it into a cloth sack, ties the top. Then he goes to the back room and returns with a slab of salt pork wrapped in paper. That's 30 cents for the cornmeal, 20 for the pork. 50 cents total. You pull out your money. You've got exactly $1.15 to your name right now. 50 cents is almost half of that. But you need to eat. You count out the coins 2 quarters and hand them over. Thaddeus takes them, makes a note in his ledger. You going to the meeting tonight, he asks. Planning on it. Good, we need to show McCabe we're serious. Show him we're not going to roll over for those white folks in Mulhall. You nod, gather your purchases. The food feels heavy in your hands, but it's good weight. Weight that means you'll eat tonight. Outside, the heat hits you like a wall. You start walking back to your sadi, moving slower now, the cornmeal sack slung over your shoulder. You pass a few people on the way. A woman carrying a basket of vegetables from her garden. 2 children chasing each other between buildings laughing. An old man sitting on a bench outside the hotel just watching the world go by. Everyone you pass nods or waves or says hello. That sense of community again. Everyone looking out for each other because out here, that's the only way to survive. By the time you reach your sadi, you're exhausted. The combination of fieldwork and midday heat has drained you completely. You eat standing up. Salt pork and cornmeal mush cooked over a small fire in the stove. It's hot and greasy and exactly what your body needs. You eat until you're full, which doesn't take much because your stomach has shrunk from months of not quite enough food. Then you lie down on your bed just for a moment, just to rest your eyes. You wake up 2 hours later to the sound of wind rattling the window cloth. The light has changed, late afternoon now. The sun lower in the sky, the heat starting to break. You've slept through the hottest part of the day. Outside, the prairie is starting to cool. The wind is stronger coming from the west now, bringing with it the smell of rain that hasn't fallen yet, but might. You need to get back to work. The field is only half planted. You've got at least 3 more hours of daylight. But first, the town meeting, Sunset Obadiah said, at the schoolhouse. You check the angle of the sun, maybe 2 hours until sunset. You could plant another hour's worth of corn before you need to clean up and head to town. Or you could just go now, early. Make sure you get a good spot. Hear everything that's said. You decide on the latter. This meeting feels important. More important than 1 more hour of planting. You change into your Sunday shirt, still worn, still patched, but cleaner than your work shirt, and head back toward Langston for the 3rd time today. The walk is easier now in the cooler air of late afternoon. Your body is rested even if it's still sore. The prairie is beautiful in this light, golden and soft, the grass moving in waves. By the time you reach the schoolhouse, the sun is touching the western horizon and people are already gathering. They come from all directions, walking from town, riding horses from distant farms, arriving in wagons loaded with whole families. You see faces you recognize and faces you don't. Obadiah Crane with his wife and 3 oldest children. Amos Collier, the Reverend Butler from the AME Church. Thaddeus Morton from the general store. Dozens of others, maybe 50 people total by the time everyone arrives. Everyone looks serious, tense. This isn't a social gathering. The schoolhouse door is propped open and people are filing inside. You follow them in. The interior is impressive even though you've seen it before. The room is maybe 30 feet by 20 with a high ceiling supported by exposed beams. The walls are painted white. The windows let in the golden evening light. Rows of benches, actual benches with backs, not just logs, are arranged facing the front of the room where a teacher's desk sits on a slightly raised platform. People are taking seats, filling in from the back forward. You find a spot on a bench near the middle squeeze, in between a farmer you don't know and a woman who might be his wife. The room gradually fills. By the time the last person enters, there are maybe 75 people packed into a space meant for 40. People standing along the walls, families crowded together and on benches, children sitting on the floor in front. Then Edward P. McCabe walks in and the room falls silent. You've seen McCabe before, but only from a distance. Up close, he's impressive. A tall man, light-skinned enough that he could probably pass for white if he wanted to, with a neatly trimmed beard and expensive clothes. He wears a black suit, a white shirt, a string tie. He looks like a lawyer or a politician, which is exactly what he is. McCabe is the reason Langston exists. He surveyed this land. He filed the paperwork with the territorial government. He sold the lots. He recruited the settlers. He lobbied the legislature. He published those pamphlets advertising Oklahoma Territory as a place where black folks could own land and govern themselves. He's a dreamer, and somehow against all odds, he made his dream real. Beside McCabe stands Roscoe Dungy, the town marshal. He's younger than McCabe, darker-skinned, with the build of a man who's done physical labor his whole life. He wears a tin star on his chest and a revolver on his hip. McCabe steps up to the platform. The room is absolutely quiet. "Thank you all for coming," he begins. His voice is strong, clear, educated, the voice of a man who's spoken in front of legislatures and city councils and crowds much larger than this. "I know it's planting season. I know you're all busy, but we have a matter that requires our attention." He pauses, letting that sink in. "Last week, two of our citizens, Marcus Hayes and Daniel Brown, traveled to Mulhall to purchase tools. They had money, they were polite, they followed all the social customs that white people expect, and they were refused service. They were threatened with violence. They were told that black folks are not welcome in that town." Murmurs ripple through the crowd: anger, fear, recognition. Everyone here has experienced something similar at some point in their lives. "This is not the first time," McCabe continues, "and it won't be the last. There are people in the surrounding territories who do not believe we have the right to be here, who do not believe that black folk should own land, govern ourselves, educate our children." He pauses again, his eyes sweeping across the room. "They want us to fail. They want us to pack up and leave. They want to prove that we're not capable of self-government, that we're not worthy of the rights we've been granted." His voice rises slightly. "We will not give them that satisfaction." The room erupts in agreement, voices calling out, "That's right. Amen. Tell it." McCabe raises his hand for silence. "The question before us tonight is this: how do we respond?" For the next hour, the meeting becomes a debate. Some people argue for direct action. A delegation should go to Mulhall and demand an apology. The marshal should arrest anyone who threatens the citizens of Langston. We should boycott any business that discriminates. We should fight back. Others argue for caution. Confrontation could lead to violence. Violence could lead to retaliation. The white settlers outnumber the black settlers 10 to 1 in this part of the territory. If it comes to an actual fight, Langston will lose. Reverend Butler stands, his large frame rising from the bench near the front. When he speaks, his deep voice fills the room. "We did not come to Oklahoma to fight," he says. "We came to build, to prove that we're as good as any man, to show that given the opportunity, we can create something lasting and valuable. Violence will not serve our cause." A few people nod, but then Obadiah Crane stands, his old body straightening despite the rheumatism. "Respect," he says quietly, and the room falls silent to hear him. Everyone knows Obadiah, everyone respects him. "I am 56 years old," Obadiah continues. "I was born a slave. I lived through the war. I lived through Reconstruction. I have been beaten, threatened, and run out of more places than I can count." He looks around the room, making eye contact with people. "I came to Oklahoma because I was told I could own land, because I was told I could vote, because I was told I could live as a free man. If we let white folks from Mulhall tell us we're not welcome, if we let them refuse us service, if we let them threaten us without consequence, then what's the point? We might as well have stayed in Mississippi or Arkansas or Tennessee." The room is absolutely quiet now. "I'm tired of running," Obadiah says. "I'm tired of lowering my eyes. I'm tired of accepting less than what I'm owed. If that means standing up to the white folks in Mulhall, then that's what we do." Applause, Watchers. Loud and sustained. People on their feet. McCabe lets it go on for a moment, then raises his hand again. "I hear you, Obadiah. I hear all of you. But let me be clear about something." His voice cuts through the noise. "We're not in a position to fight a war. We don't have the numbers. We don't have the resources. If it comes to violence, we will lose." The applause dies. "What we have," McCabe continues, "is the law. This is United States territory. We are American citizens. We have the same rights as any white settler. And if those rights are violated, we have recourse through the courts." "The courts," someone calls out from the back. "The courts are run by white men." "Some of them," McCabe acknowledges, "but not all. There are federal judges who will uphold the law. There are attorneys who will take our cases. There are newspapers that will publish our stories. The legal system is not perfect, but it's the best tool we have. He looks around the room. Here's what I propose. We document every incident, every threat, every refusal of service, every act of discrimination. We gather evidence. We build a case. And then we take it to the territorial legislature. We make it a public issue. We force them to choose between upholding the law and siding with lawless white settlers. And if that doesn't work, someone asks, McCabe's face hardens. Then we explore other options. But we try the law first. We prove that we're civilized, that we're law-abiding, that we deserve the rights we've been promised. The debate continues for another 30 minutes. Voices rising and falling, anger and fear and determination mixing together. But gradually a consensus forms. Document, gather evidence, use the legal system, and if that fails, reassess. It's not satisfying. It's not the righteous confrontation that part of you wanted, but it's practical, it's smart, and it might actually work. The meeting ends around 9 o'clock. People file out of the schoolhouse into the night. You walk home under a sky full of stars. More stars than you've ever seen. Out here without city lights, without the smoke and haze of civilization, the Milky Way is a glowing river across the darkness. You think about what Obadiah said, about being tired of running, about standing up. You understand that feeling. You feel it in your bones, but you also understand what McCabe said, about choosing battles carefully, about using the tools available. It's a hard balance and you don't know if you'll ever find it. But tonight, walking home under the stars, you feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the desperate hope that things might get better someday, but the solid hope that comes from being part of something, from standing in a room with 75 other people who refuse to give up. That's worth something. That might be worth everything. The sounds of the prairie surround you. Wind in the grass, distant coyotes calling, the creak of your boots on hard earth. Tomorrow, you'll finish planting the corn. The day after, you'll help Obadiah with his field. The day after that, whatever needs doing. The work is endless. The challenges are real. The danger is constant. But you're not facing it alone. And that makes all the difference. 3 weeks pass. You finish planting the corn. It takes 3 days total, just like Obadiah said it would. Your back screams, your hands bleed, but you get it done. 8 acres of Oklahoma yellow corn planted in rows 3 feet apart, seeds 1 foot apart within the rows. 240 bushels if everything goes right. $92 if everything goes right. Everything has to go right. You help Obadiah with his north field on Friday just like you promised. 8 hours behind the plow, turning virgin sod. Your arms shake by the end of the day, but Obadiah feeds you a hot meal and sends you home with a slab of salt pork he can't really afford to give away. You earned it, he says. The corn begins to sprout in the second week of May. You check the field every morning, walking the rows, counting the successful germinations. Tiny green shoots pushing up through the dark soil, fragile, vulnerable, but alive. The germination rate looks good. Maybe 80% of the seeds have sprouted. That's acceptable. Better than acceptable. You calculate automatically. 80% of 240 bushels is 192 bushels. Times 40 cents per bushel equals $76.80. Minus the $4 seed cost equals $72.80 net. Still good, still more than you've ever made in your life. If the weather holds. The weather turns hot in late May. The temperature climbs into the 90s every day. The sky is cloudless for a week straight. The grass starts to brown at the edges. Your cornfield needs water. There's no irrigation out here. No way to bring water to the field except by hand. You carry bucket after bucket from the town well, pouring water on the young corn plants, trying to keep them alive through the heat. It's exhausting work, probably futile work, but you do it anyway because the alternative is watching your crop die. Other farmers are doing the same thing. You see them in the early morning and late evening, carrying buckets, pouring water, fighting the same losing battle against the Oklahoma sun. Then on a Tuesday afternoon in early June, the sky changes. You're in your field hoeing weeds between the corn rows when you notice the light shifting. You look up. The southern horizon is black. Not gray, not dark, black, and it's moving toward you. You've lived in Oklahoma long enough now to know what that means. Storm, a big one. You drop the hoe and run for your soddy. The wind is already picking up, gusting, hard enough to bend the grass flat, strong enough that you have to lean into it to make progress. You reach the soddy and pull the door shut, securing it with the leather strap latch. The window shutters' rough wooden frames covered with oiled cloth are already closed and latched. You did that this morning because the sky had looked threatening even then. You stand in the center of the single room and wait. The wind hits first. It's not like normal wind. It's a physical force that makes the entire soddy shake. You can hear the roof poles creaking under the strain. Dust and bits of grass blow through gaps around the door and windows that you didn't know existed. Then the hail comes. You hear it before you see it. A roaring sound like a waterfall, like 1,000 drums. Then impacts on the roof. Loud, violent, chaotic. Ice is falling from the sky. Not small hail, not pea-sized or marble-sized. This is serious hail. Stones the size of bird eggs, some bigger. You stand there helpless, listening to your roof get pounded, hoping the sod will hold, hoping the poles won't break, knowing that if they do, you'll be crushed. The hail lasts for 10 minutes. 10 minutes that feel like an hour. Then it stops as suddenly as it started. Silence. You wait another minute listening, making sure it's really over. Then you carefully unlatch the door and look outside. The prairie is white. Hailstones cover the ground like snow, piled up in drifts against the side of your soddy. Some of them are the size of hen's eggs, some bigger than that. And your cornfield. You can see it from the door. The young corn plants that were standing upright this morning are now beaten flat, shredded, destroyed. You walk out into the hail not caring that it soaks through your boots. You walk to the edge of the field and just stand there looking. Total loss, 8 acres of corn, 3 weeks of growth, wiped out in 10 minutes. The calculation is automatic, brutal. Without the corn, you have no crop to sell. Without income, you can't buy supplies for next year. Without supplies, you can't farm. Without farming, you can't eat. You're ruined. You stand there for a long time, not moving, not thinking, just numb. Then you see Obadiah walking toward you across the prairie. He's moving slowly, picking his way through the hailstones, his limp more pronounced than usual. When he reaches you, he doesn't say anything. He just looks at your field, then at his own field, visible in the distance. Also destroyed. Well, he says finally, shit. It's the first time you've heard him curse. You almost laugh, but the laugh turns into something else. Something that might be a sob. Obadiah puts a hand on your shoulder. His grip is firm, steady. This happened to me in Arkansas, he says. Lost everything to a tornado. Took me 2 years to recover. I don't have 2 years. I know. You stand together in silence. You know what I did, Obadiah says. I got up the next morning and started over. Because that's all you can do. The land doesn't care if you're tired. The weather doesn't care if you've lost everything. You either keep going or you die. He squeezes your shoulder. You're not going to die. You're young, you're strong, you'll figure it out. How? I don't know, but you will. He turns and walks back toward his own soddy, leaving you alone with your destroyed field. You stand there until the sun sets, until the hailstones start to melt and the water soaks into the ground. Then you go inside, lie down on your bed and stare at the ceiling. For the first time since you arrived in Oklahoma, you let yourself consider leaving, going back to Mississippi, finding work, giving up on this dream of owning land. It would be easier, safer, less painful. But then you think about what Obadiah said, about getting up and starting over, about not dying, and you think about what you saw at the town meeting, the 75 people who refused to give up, the community that stands together. You didn't come to Oklahoma because it was easy. You came because it was yours. The storm doesn't change that. You'll find a way. Somehow, you have to. The next morning, you wake early and walk into town before the sun is fully up. Main Street looks like a battlefield. Hailstones still litter the ground, even though most have melted. Windows are broken in several buildings. The schoolhouse has a hole in the roof where a particularly large hailstone punched straight through, but people are already working, sweeping hail off porches, boarding up broken windows, assessing damage, figuring out what can be salvaged and what's lost forever. You head to the general store. Thaddeus Morton is inside talking to a group of farmers. They all have the same expression you probably have on your face. Shock, grief, determination. Josiah, Thaddeus says when he sees you, your crop a total loss. He nods grimly. Most everyone. I've heard maybe 3 people north of town whose fields weren't hit as hard. Everyone else is starting over. How, someone asks. It might be you. You're not sure. I don't have money for new seed. Thaddeus exchanges a look with another man, Amos Collier, you think, then says, we're going to pool resources. Everyone who has seed shares it with everyone who doesn't. We plant what we can, late season crops, and we all share the harvest. That's communism, someone mutters. No, Thaddeus says sharply. That's survival. We either work together or we die alone. Your choice. Nobody argues. For the next week, Langston transforms into a collective effort unlike anything you've witnessed. People who have seeds share it freely. Farmers who avoided the worst of the hail donate a portion of their seed stock to those who lost everything. Thaddeus opens his store's reserve seed he'd been planning to sell and distributes it at cost or on credit or sometimes just for free to families who have nothing. People who have tools lend them. The one farmer who still has a working plow takes it from field to field, helping multiple families break ground for replanting. Knowledge gets shared freely. You learn about cowpeas, a crop you'd never heard of before, but which grows fast and tolerates heat and drought better than corn. You learn about sorghum, which can be planted late and still produce a harvest. You learn about intercropping, companion planting, soil retention techniques. You receive 2 bushels of cowpea seed from the community pool. No charge. You receive 1 bushel of sorghum seed. Again, no charge. You'll share the harvest, Thaddeus says. That's the payment. You also take $2.50 worth of additional seed on credit. Your first debt ever. Your total debt, $2.50. Your total cash remaining 65 cents. But you have seed, you have a chance. Your 8 acres get replanted, not with corn. It's too late in the season for that. But with cowpeas and sorghum, lower value crops, yes, but something, 4 acres of cowpeas, 4 acres of sorghum. Obadiah helps you plant his bad knee and all. Amos Collier comes out for a day and works alongside you. Thaddeus leaves his store in his wife's hands and spends an afternoon in your field. Other farmers show up, people you barely know. They work for a few hours, then move on to the next farm that needs help. This is what community means. Not just living near each other, but actually supporting each other, sacrificing for each other, recognizing that if one person fails, everyone is weakened. So everyone's success is everyone's business. You've never experienced anything like it. Back in Mississippi, everyone was so ground down by poverty and oppression that mutual aid was nearly impossible. You were all competing for the same scarce resources, all trying to stay in the good graces of the same white landowners, all too exhausted to help each other even when you wanted to. Here it's different. Here people help because they understand that your survival is tied to theirs. That Langston only works if everyone makes it work. Let me tell you about the crops you're planting because the technique matters. Cowpeas. Also called black-eyed peas, though yours are actually brown-eyed. They're a legume related to beans. They grow fast, 60 to 70 days from planting to harvest. They tolerate heat. They tolerate drought. They fix nitrogen in the soil, which means they'll actually improve your land for next year's corn crop. The technique Obadiah teaches you. Plant the seeds 6 inches apart in rows 3 feet apart. Not as dense as corn, because the vines will spread. Each plant will sprawl across the ground, sending out runners that can stretch 2 or 3 feet in every direction. Drop 3 seeds per hole about an inch deep, cover with soil, move on. It's faster than planting corn because the spacing is wider. You can plant an acre in a day if you work hard. The expected yield is about 15 bushels per acre. At the current market price of $1.20 per bushel, that's $18 per acre. 4 acres of cowpeas equals 60 bushels times $1.20 equals $72. Sorghum, a grain crop that looks like corn but grows taller and thinner. Some people call it Milo. It's drought-resistant, heat-tolerant, and has a 90-day growing season, which means you can plant it in mid-June and still harvest in September. The technique, broadcast the seed. That means you scatter it by hand across the prepared field, walking back and forth in a pattern that covers the ground evenly. Then you harrow it, drag a heavy rake across the soil to work the seeds in and cover them. It's less precise than row planting, but faster. You can seed an acre in half a day. The expected yield is about 25 bushels per acre. At 50 cents per bushel, that's $12.50 per acre. 4 acres of sorghum equals 100 bushels times 50 cents equals $50. New total projected income. $72 from cowpeas plus $50 from sorghum equals $122. Minus your debt of $2.50 equals $119.50. That's actually more than you would have made from the corn. If everything goes right, if you finish planting by the end of June, 4 acres of cowpeas, 4 acres of sorghum. The seeds are in the ground. Now it's just waiting and hoping and working. The cowpeas sprout in 7 days. Tiny green shoots with two round leaves pushing up through the soil in neat rows. The germination rate is good, maybe 85%. The sorghum takes longer. 10 days before you see the first shoots. But when they come strong. Thick green stems already 6 inches tall within 2 weeks. July is brutal. The temperature climbs above 100 degrees and stays there for days at a time. The sun beats down on the prairie like a hammer, baking the earth, pulling moisture out of everything it touches. You work in the early morning from first light until about 10 o'clock. Then you retreat to your soddy door and window open to catch any breeze and wait out the worst of the heat. In the late afternoon, when the sun is lower, you go back out and work until you can't see your hands anymore. The cowpeas are growing, slowly but growing. Their tough plants evolved for exactly this kind of climate. The vines spread across the ground, their leaves dark green, their small white flowers eventually giving way to long pods. The sorghum is taller, shooting up fast once it gets established. By late July, it's over your head, the stalks thick and strong, the seed heads forming at the top. It's not what you planned. It's not corn. It won't bring the same price at market. But it's food. In the evenings when the work is done and the air starts to cool, you sometimes walk into town. Not for any particular reason, just to be around people. To remember you're part of something larger than yourself. The general store becomes a gathering place as the sun sets. Men sit on the porch talking, sharing news, complaining about the heat, but doing it together. You become part of that group, the regulars, the men who survived their first year in Oklahoma. You share stories, you complain about the weather in that way people do when complaining is really just a form of bonding. You make plans for next year. Obadiah is there most days. Amos, Thaddeus when he's not busy with customers, other farmers whose faces have become familiar, even if you don't know all their names. You talk about everything: farming techniques, weather patterns, politics. McCabe's efforts in Guthrie have had some success. The territorial government has acknowledged the complaints about Mulhall. They've promised to send investigators to look into the incidents of discrimination. Whether anything will come of it, nobody knows, but it's something. One evening in early August, Obadiah mentions that his sorghum is ready for harvest. Could use some help, he says. If you've got time. When? Tomorrow, day after, however long it takes. You remember the trade you made back in April. A day's work for a day's work. He helped you plow. You'll help him harvest. I'll be there tomorrow, you say. The next morning you walk to Obadiah's farm before the sun is fully up. His land is a mile west of yours. 80 acres twice what you have, but only about 12 acres under cultivation. The rest is still virgin prairie. Obadiah is already in his field when you arrive. So are his 3 oldest sons, boys of 14, 12, and 10, and 2 other farmers you recognize from town. Josiah, Obadiah says, grab a sickle. Harvesting sorghum is hard work. The stalks are 6 feet tall, thick as your thumb, at the base topped with heavy seed heads. You have to cut each stalk individually with a hand sickle, working your way down the row, bending and cutting until your back screams and your hands cramp. The technique Obadiah shows you: grip the stalk with your left hand about 2 feet from the ground. Swing the sickle with your right hand, cutting through the stalk in one clean motion. Let the cut stalk fall. Move to the next one. You work in teams. One person cuts. Another person follows behind, gathering the cut stalks into bundles. A third person ties the bundles with twine. A fourth person loads the bundles onto a wagon. You rotate positions every hour so nobody gets stuck with the hardest job for too long. It's hot. The sun climbs higher. The temperature rises. Sweat soaks through your shirt. Your hands blister from gripping the sickle handle. Your back aches from the constant bending. But you keep going. This is the work. This is what it takes. You work for 10 hours with short breaks for water and a quick meal at midday. Cold cornbread and salt pork that Obadiah's wife brings out to the field. By the end of the day, you've harvested about 3 acres. Maybe 75 bushels worth of sorghum bundled and loaded onto wagons. Tomorrow you'll thresh it. Beat the bundles with flails to separate the grain from the chaff. Then winnow it, toss it in the air, and let the wind carry away the chaff while the heavier grain falls back into baskets. Good work, Obadiah says as the sun sets. Come back tomorrow. We'll finish it. You work another full day, then a third day on your own farm, harvesting your 4 acres of sorghum, using the same technique Obadiah taught you. Amos Collier helps you for a day, then Thaddeus. Then 2 farmers whose names you barely know but who show up anyway because that's how Langston works. Your sorghum yield 98 bushels, close to the projection. At 50 cents per bushel, that's $49. The cowpeas are ready in late August. Harvesting cowpeas is different from sorghum. Less dramatic but more tedious. You have to pick the pods by hand. Walk the rows looking for pods that have turned brown and dry. Pick them, put them in a basket, move on. Each plant has dozens of pods. Each pod has maybe 6 or 8 peas inside. You pick for hours and barely make a dent in the field. It's mind-numbing work, but you do it because the alternative is letting the crop rot. You pick for 8 hours a day for 5 days. Your fingers grow sore from the repetitive motion. Your back aches from bending over thousands of plants. But slowly the baskets fill. You dry the picked pods in the sun, spread out on a canvas cloth beside your sadi. It takes 3 days. Then you shell them, break open the dried pods, and extract the peas by hand. More tedious work, more hours of repetitive motion. But eventually you have cloth sacks full of dried cowpeas. Brown and hard, but food. Your cowpea yield 62 bushels, 2 more than the projection. At $1.20 per bushel, that's $74.40. You sell 50 bushels to Thaddeus at the general store. He pays you $60 cash. You keep 12 bushels for yourself, food for the winter. You sell 80 bushels of sorghum, $40 cash. You keep 18 bushels for seed and food. Total cash income from the harvest, $100. You stand in Thaddeus's store holding the money in your hands. 5 $20 bills. More money than you've ever held in your life. You pay off your debt first. $2.50, remaining $97.50. From $1.15 in April to $97.50 in September. You've made it. On September 20th, Langston holds its first harvest festival. It's not an official holiday. Nobody decreed it. But somebody suggested it, and the idea caught on, and now the whole town is gathering on Main Street to celebrate. Tables are set up, covered with dishes brought by every family in town. Cowpeas cooked with salt pork. Sorghum bread dense and slightly sweet. Fried chicken and extravagance, but this is a special occasion. Sweet potatoes roasted until they're soft inside and crispy outside. Greens cooked with onions and bacon fat. Cornbread made by the few people who managed to save some corn through the storm. Pies made with wild plums gathered from bushes near the creek. It's more food than you've seen in one place since you left Mississippi. The whole town is here, 200 people, maybe more, all dressed in their best clothes, which for most people means they're only good clothes, but everyone has made an effort. Children run between the tables laughing and playing games. Adults talk and eat, and for a few hours forget about how hard life is. There's music, a man with a fiddle, another with a banjo. They play while people dance in the street. Couples spinning and laughing. Children trying to copy the adults and mostly just jumping around. You stand on the edge watching. Not dancing, you never learned how, and you're too self-conscious to try now. But watching, taking it in. Reverend Butler stands on an overturned crate and says a blessing. Thank God for the harvest, he says, his deep voice carrying across the crowd. Thank the people for their perseverance. Thank the land for its gifts, even when those gifts came hard. He pauses. We have been tested, he says, and we have survived. This is just the beginning. This town will grow. This community will thrive. And one day people will look at Langston and see what we have built and know that black folks can do anything white folks can do. Amen, the crowd responds. Amen. The feast goes on for hours. You eat until you're actually full, for the first time in months. Actually full. Your stomach not just satisfied, but completely content. You talk to people, Obadiah and his family, Thaddeus and Clara from the store, Amos Collier. Families whose names you know but haven't really talked to before. And you realize something. This is home now. Not Mississippi. Not the place you came from with its memories of family and childhood and everything you left behind. Here, this prairie town with its dirt streets and sod buildings and 200 determined people. This is home. As the sun sets and lanterns are lit, someone starts singing an old hymn. Others join in. The voices rise together, filling the evening air. Harmony, finding each other naturally the way they do when people have sung together in churches their whole lives. You join in too, quietly at first, then louder, your voice mixing with all the others, becoming part of something larger. This is what you came for, this moment, this feeling, freedom, community, belonging. It was worth everything. The stars come out, the temperature drops. The crowd gradually thins as families head home, children asleep on their parents' shoulders, bellies full, hearts content. You walk back to your sadi in the darkness. The prairie is quiet around you. Just the wind in the grass and the distant call of a coyote. Tomorrow, you'll start preparing for winter. You'll winterize the sadi. You'll lay in firewood. You'll buy supplies from the store. But tonight, there's just this, the memory of community, the taste of good food, the sound of voices singing together. You lie down on your rope bed, the grass-stuffed mattress creaking under your weight. Outside, the wind whispers through the grass, the same sound you've heard every night for more than a year now. The voice of the prairie. Your breathing slows. Sleep is coming. And tomorrow the work continues, but you're not afraid anymore. You know how to do this now. You know how to survive. More than that, you know you're not doing it alone. October brings cooler weather. The brutal heat breaks. Mornings are crisp, evenings are cold. The grass turns from green to gold, then to brown. The prairie transforms, preparing for winter the way it has for thousands of years. You spend the month preparing. Winterizing the sadi becomes your primary focus. You find every gap in the walls and stuff them with a mixture of mud and grass. You check the roof, replacing sod bricks that have started to crumble over the summer. The technique is the same as when you built the place. Cut fresh bricks from the prairie grass, side-down roots, holding everything together. Lift them onto the roof. Pack them tight against the existing sod. It takes 3 days to make the sadi truly weatherproof. You also need firewood. Wood is scarce on the prairie. There are a few cottonwood trees along the creek 3 miles east, but you can't just cut them down. Other people need them too. Instead, you trade. A farmer named Jacob Wheeler lives 5 miles north near a creek where cottonwood grows thick. He's willing to trade wood for food. 2 bushels of your cowpeas for 1 cord of cottonwood. A cord is 128 cubic feet of stacked wood, cut into pieces about 18 inches long, split to fit in your small stove. It's heavy work hauling it back to your sadi. You borrow a wagon from Amos Collier, load it with wood, and make the trip twice over 2 days. You stack the wood against the north wall of your sadi, the side that takes the worst of the winter wind. Then you cover it with canvas cloth to keep it dry. 1 cord should last about 2 months if you're careful. If you only burn what's absolutely necessary for cooking in minimal heat, you'll need another cord in December, another trade, more cowpeas. On the 1st of November, you make a trip to Guthrie. It's a 30-mile journey. You walk because you don't own a horse and can't afford to rent one. You leave before dawn and arrive in Guthrie around 2 in the afternoon. 6 hours of steady walking across empty prairie. Guthrie is the territorial capital. It's a real town, not like Langston. Wooden buildings, some of them 2 and 3 stories tall. Paved streets, actual stores with glass windows. Hotels, restaurants, a courthouse, a bank. It's overwhelming after months on the prairie. You go to Morton's Mercantile, no relation to Thaddeus Morton, and buy supplies with your harvest money. The list you've prepared: salt pork 10 pounds, $2. Flour 20 pounds, $1. Coffee, real coffee, 2 pounds, $1. This is a luxury, but you've earned it. Matches 2 boxes, 20 cents. Lamp oil 2 gallons, $1.60. A new blanket, wool, $4. Your old one is worn through in 3 places. Needles and thread, 15 cents. A whetstone for sharpening tools, 50 cents. Total $10.45. You also stop at a cobbler and get your boots resoled. The leather soles are almost worn through. New soles cost $1.50. The cobbler does the work while you wait, and you walk out with boots that feel solid under your feet for the first time in months. Total spent in Guthrie, $11.95. Remaining from your harvest, $85.55. You walk home in the late afternoon carrying your supplies in a cloth sack. The same 6-hour walk, but this time with weight on your back. Your shoulders ache by the time you reach your sadi after dark. But you have supplies. You have food. You have lamp oil and matches and a new blanket. You'll survive the winter. November is quiet. The planting is done. The harvest is done. There's maintenance work, checking the sadi's roof after every rain, making sure the walls stay solid, keeping the wood pile dry. But it's not the relentless labor of planting season or harvest season. You have time to think. You write a letter to your mother, the 4th one since you left Mississippi. You tell her about the harvest, about the storm that destroyed your corn and how the community came together, about the money you've saved, about Langston and the schoolhouse and Obadiah Crane. You don't tell her about the times you went to bed hungry, about the fear you felt when the hailstorm hit, about the moments when you considered giving up. You mail the letter from the post office in Langston. It costs 3 cents. You don't know if she'll get it. The mail service is unreliable, and you're not even sure your mother can read well enough to make it through the whole thing. But you send it anyway. The first frost comes in mid-November. You wake to find the grass white and brittle, your breath visible in the cold air inside the sadi. The water in your bucket has a thin layer of ice on top that you have to break with your hand. Winter is here, the routine changes. Instead of working in the fields all day, you work on other tasks, repairing tools, making improvements to the sadi, preparing for spring planting even though spring is 5 months away. You also spend more time in town. The general store has a stove, and men gather there in the afternoons to warm up and talk. You become part of that group, the regulars, the men who survived their first full year in Oklahoma. Obadiah is there most days sitting on a chair near the stove, his bad knee propped up. Amos, Thaddeus when he's not busy with customers. Other farmers whose names you know now. Jacob Wheeler, Thomas Redding, Marcus Hayes, one of the men who was refused service in Mulhall. You talk about everything. Farming techniques for next year, the price of seed, the weather, politics. McCabe has been in Guthrie for weeks meeting with territorial officials. There's talk that Oklahoma might become a state within the next few years. Talk about what that would mean for black settlements like Langston. If we become a state, Obadiah says one afternoon, we'll have real representation, senators, congressmen. We could actually have a say in how things are run. Or they could write laws that keep us out, someone else says, like they did in the South. That's why McCabe is there, Thaddeus says, to make sure that doesn't happen. The conversations go in circles, hope and fear mixing together. Nobody knows what the future holds, but at least you're having the conversation. At least you have a voice, however small. In early December, the first snow falls. You wake to find the world transformed. White, silent, beautiful. You stand outside your sadi watching the snowfall. Fat flakes drifting down from a gray sky, covering the prairie, covering everything. It's cold, bitter cold. You can feel it trying to get through your coat, through your shirt, all the way to your skin. But it's beautiful. You've never seen anything like it. Snow in Mississippi was rare, and when it came, it was usually just a dusting that melted by afternoon. This is real snow, accumulating, changing the landscape. The snow falls for 2 days straight. By the time it stops, there's 8 inches on the ground, maybe more in the drifts where the wind has piled it up. You spend the next week mostly inside, only going out to get water from the town well and to bring in firewood from the stack against the north wall. The temperature drops below zero. Your water bucket freezes solid overnight. You have to break the ice with a hammer just to get water to drink. But your sadi stays relatively warm. The thick sod walls insulate against the cold better than wooden walls would. The fire in your small stove keeps the air breathable, keeps your hands from going numb when you're inside. You read your mother's Bible by lamplight, the pages worn soft from years of handling. You think about her, wonder if she's warm, wonder if she has enough to eat, wonder if she thinks about you. You survive, one day at a time. Christmas comes on a Friday. The town gathers at the church for a service. The AME church is small, barely bigger than your sadi built from sod like everything else. But it's packed. Every inch of floor space filled with people standing or sitting on rough benches. The church has been decorated with whatever people could find. Branches from the few scrubby trees that grow near the creek. Dried flowers. Strips of colorful fabric. It's not elaborate, but it's something. Reverend Butler preaches about the birth of Christ, about hope in darkness, about new beginnings, about the journey from slavery to freedom, from Egypt to the promised land, from Mississippi to Oklahoma. The parallels are obvious. The congregation responds with amen and yes, Lord, and preach it. The choir sings if you can call 15 people standing together a choir, but their voices are powerful, echoing off the sod walls, filling the small space with sound. Go down, Moses. Swing low, sweet chariot. Amazing grace. Songs that carry the weight of generations. Songs that have sustained black people through slavery, through Reconstruction, through everything that tried to break them. You stand there surrounded by your neighbors and sing. After the service, there's a small celebration. Nothing elaborate. Cookies made by Clara Morton. Hot cider sweetened with a little sugar. Children receive small gifts, a piece of candy, a wooden toy carved by hand, a new pair of mittens knitted from wool. You don't have family here. No mother or sister or brothers. But you're surrounded by people who have become something like family. Obadiah approaches you holding something wrapped in cloth. Got you something, he says. You unwrap it. Leather gloves, handmade. The stitching is rough, uneven, but they're warm and sturdy. Your hands were bleeding after the planting, Obadiah says. Can't have that next year. You don't know what to say. You didn't expect a gift. Didn't prepare one. Thank you, you manage. You're a good man, Josiah, Obadiah says. Your parents would be proud. That night, walking home under a sky full of stars, you think about that. Would they be proud? You've survived a year in Oklahoma. You've claimed land, planted crops, survived disasters. You've become part of a community. You've stood up at meetings and worked alongside your neighbors. You're not the same person who arrived here 16 months ago. You're harder, tougher, more capable, but also more connected, more aware of being part of something larger than yourself. Maybe they would be proud. You hope so. January is the hardest month. The cold is relentless. The days are short. The sun barely climbs above the horizon before it sets again. The isolation weighs on you. You spend long hours alone in your soddy. The work outside is minimal. When the ground is frozen and the temperature is below zero, you can't farm. You can barely survive. You think about Mississippi, about your family, about the life you left behind. Sometimes you regret coming to Oklahoma. Sometimes you wish you'd stayed where you knew people, where you understood how things worked, where you had family close enough to touch. But then you remember why you left. The sharecropping, the endless debt, the white overseers who treated you like you were still a slave. The constant reminder that freedom was just a word on paper, that you would never truly own anything, never truly control your own life. At least here you're free, even if freedom is cold and lonely and hard. One night in late January, there's a knock on your door. You open it to find Obadiah standing in the snow. He's wrapped in a blanket, his breath steaming in the freezing air. Can't sleep, he says. Mind if I come in? You step aside and he enters, brushing snow off his shoulders. You build up the fire, make coffee, weak. Coffee, you're running low, and sit together at your small table. For a while, neither of you says anything. Then Obadiah speaks. I ever tell you about my son? No, sir. Had a son back in Tennessee. He'd be about your age now if he'd lived. He stares into his coffee cup. He died when he was 12. Worked on the same plantation I did. Got kicked by a horse. The master wouldn't pay for a doctor. Said it was just a colored boy. Not worth the expense. His voice is steady, but his hands shake slightly. He died 3 days later, in my arms. Nothing I could do. You don't know what to say. That's why I'm here, Obadiah continues. That's why I came to Oklahoma, because I couldn't stay in a place where my son's life was worth less than a horse. He looks up at you. You remind me of him sometimes. The way you work, the way you don't complain, the way you don't quit. I complain plenty, you say. He smiles. Maybe, but you don't quit. That's what matters. He finishes his coffee and stands to leave. I should get back. Just wanted to check on you. Make sure you're all right. I'm all right. Good. He heads for the door, then pauses. This place, Langston, it's not perfect. It's hard. It's dangerous. But it's ours. Don't forget that. I won't. After he leaves, you sit for a long time staring at the fire. Obadiah lost his son, survived slavery, survived Reconstruction, survived decades of violence and degradation, and he still has hope, still believes in Langston, still gets up every morning and does the work. If he can do that, you can too. February brings the first hints of warmth. The snow melts. The ground begins to thaw. The days get fractionally longer. Not much, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, but enough to notice. You start planning for spring planting. This year will be different. This year you know what you're doing. You know the land, you know the weather patterns. You know what crops work and what crops don't. This year you'll plant corn again, but you'll also plant cowpeas as insurance. And sorghum. Diversify. Don't put everything into one crop. You also need to expand. 8 acres isn't enough to really build a future. You need at least 12 acres under cultivation. Maybe 16 if you can manage it. That means more breaking, more plowing, more work. But you're ready. In early March, you borrow a mule from Amos Collier again. The same trade as before, 2 days of labor for the use of his mule for a week. You start breaking new ground. 4 more acres. Virgin prairie grass roots going down 5 feet deep, all tangled together in that impossible mat. The work is just as brutal as you remember. Walking behind the plow hour after hour, day after day, fighting the stubborn prairie sod that doesn't want to give up its hold on the earth. Your hands blister again. Your back screams again. Every muscle in your body aches again. But you keep going. Obadiah helps when he can. So does Amos. So do others. The community that came together after the hailstorm is still there, still strong, still willing to help. By the end of March, you've broken 4 more acres. 12 acres total now. You're exhausted, worn down to nothing, but proud. This is your land, your work, your future. April comes again, planting season. This time you're confident. You know what you're doing. You've saved seed from last year's cowpea harvest. You bought corn seed from Thaddeus better quality than last year, and you negotiated a better price because you've learned how to negotiate. The planting goes smoothly. No disasters, no drama, just work. 8 acres of corn, 4 acres of cowpeas. The rows are straight, the spacing is perfect. The seeds go into soil that's been properly prepared, soil that's been enriched by last year's cowpea crop, fixing nitrogen into the earth. If the weather cooperates, you'll have a good harvest, but you're not thinking about failure. You're thinking about success. By mid-April, the planting is done. The seeds are in the ground. Now it's just waiting and hoping and working. One afternoon in late April, you're checking your field when Obadiah comes walking across the prairie toward you. You can tell something's wrong from the way he's moving, slower than usual, unsteady. When he reaches you, he sits down heavily on the ground. "You all right?" you ask. "Knee gave out," he says. His face is pale, sweating despite the cool air. You help him back to his soddy half, carrying him the last 100 yards. His wife comes out, takes one look at him, and makes him lie down. She sends one of the children to Guthrie to fetch the doctor. It's a 30-mile round trip. The child leaves on horseback riding fast. The doctor arrives the next day. He examines Obadiah. Rheumatism, he says. Advanced. Chronic. There's no cure. Just pain management and rest. The cost $5. You offer to pay. Obadiah refuses. "Save your money," he says. "You'll need it." But over the next 2 weeks, it becomes clear that Obadiah can't work his field this year. His knee won't support him. The pain is too intense. So you do it for him. You plow his 8 acres. You plant his corn. No trade, no payment. You do it because that's what he would do. Because he's taught you everything you know about farming this land. Because he's become more than a neighbor. He's become something like a father. Obadiah watches from his porch, sitting in a chair. His wife brings out his bad leg propped up on a stool. "You're doing good work," he calls out. You don't answer. Just keep plowing. One evening when the day's work is done, you sit with Obadiah on his porch. His wife brings out cups of water. The sun is setting, painting the prairie in shades of gold and orange. "You know what I've been thinking about," Obadiah says. "What's that legacy? What we leave behind?" He's quiet for a moment. "I told you about my son, how he died, how I couldn't do anything to save him." You nod. "I used to think that was the end of my legacy, that I'd failed, that I'd have nothing to leave behind when I'm gone." He looks out at the prairie. "But we're watching you these past 2 years, I've realized something. Legacy isn't just about blood. It's about what you teach, what you pass on, the knowledge, the skills, the determination." He turns to look at you. You came here not knowing how to farm, not knowing how to break soil or plant corn or survive a prairie winter. I taught you those things, and you learned, and now you're teaching others. I haven't taught anyone anything. You will. Someday someone younger will come along, scared and uncertain like you were, and you'll teach them. You'll pass on what I taught you, and that's legacy. That's what outlasts us. You sit in silence, watching the sun disappear below the horizon. "My son's life was cut short," Obadiah says quietly, "but his spirit lives on. In me, in this place, in you, in everyone who refuses to give up, who keeps fighting, who builds something that lasts." He pauses. "That's enough. That has to be enough." May arrives. The corn sprouts, the cowpeas sprout, the germination rate is good, better than last year. The plants are healthy, strong, growing fast in the warming spring weather. You check the fields every morning, yours and Obadiah's both. Walking the rows looking for problems, calculating yields. If everything continues like this, you'll harvest 300 bushels of corn and 80 bushels of cowpeas. At current market prices, that's $120 from the corn and $96 from the cowpeas. $216 total, minus seed costs and other expenses, you'll net about $190. $190. 3 years ago, you were making $45 a year in Mississippi. You're building something real here, something that will last. One afternoon in mid-May, you're walking back from Obadiah's field when you see the postmaster from Langston riding toward you on horseback. "Josiah Freeman," he calls out. "Yes, sir. Got a letter for you from Mississippi." Your heart jumps. A letter. From home. He hands it to you. The envelope is thin, the handwriting unfamiliar. Not your mother's hand. She would have asked someone to write for her. You thank the postmaster and he rides off. You stand there on the prairie holding the envelope, afraid to open it. Finally, you tear it open and unfold the single page inside. The handwriting is shaky, uncertain. It takes you a moment to make out the words. Dear Josiah, it begins. This is Reverend Butler writing for your mother. She wanted me to tell you she got your letters, all three of them. She is very proud of you. You have to stop reading. Your eyes are blurring. You wipe them and continue. She wanted you to know she is doing fine. Your uncle is helping her. She thinks about you every day and prays for you every night. She is proud that you own land. She says your father would be proud too. There's more, but then you reach the part that makes your chest tight. She also wanted me to tell you something important. She says don't come back. She says you have a future there and nothing here. She says she loves you and she's glad you're free. She says that's all a mother can ask for her son, to be truly free. The letter ends with her mark an X because she can't write her own name. You stand there on the prairie holding the letter and you cry. Not from sadness, from relief, from love, from the knowledge that your mother understands, that she approves, that she wants you to stay here and build this life. You fold the letter carefully and put it in your pocket. Then you walk back to your sadi and put it in your trunk next to your grandfather's plow blade and your Sunday vest. The things that matter, the things you'll keep forever. One evening in late May, almost exactly 2 years after you first arrived in Langston, you stand at the edge of your field and take stock. 2 years ago, you were terrified, uncertain, overwhelmed by the enormity of what you'd taken on. Now you own 40 acres of land. You've built a home rough but yours. You've survived a storm that destroyed your first crop. You've replanted. You've made it through 2 winters. You've become part of a community. You've learned skills that will sustain you for the rest of your life. You've changed. You're leaner, harder. Your hands are permanently calloused. Your face is weathered from sun and wind. But you're also more confident, more capable, more yourself. This land has tested you in ways you never imagined, and you've passed every test. Not easily, not perfectly, but you've passed. You think about the people who said Oklahoma would kill you, who said black folks couldn't make it on their own. They were wrong. Langston is still here, still growing, still proving that black Americans can own land, govern themselves, build communities, and thrive. It's not easy. It might never be easy, but it's possible. And that's enough. 10 years will pass. Langston will have 500 residents. The schoolhouse will expand, adding new rooms, eventually becoming Langston University, a real college where black students can study anything they want. You'll have a son by then, maybe a daughter too. They'll attend that school. They'll learn mathematics and history and science. They'll read books you've never heard of. Your son will stand in a classroom with real desks and real books and a real teacher, and he'll learn to read without fear, without hiding, without risk. And one day, when he's grown, he'll bring his own children to visit your farm. He'll point to the fields and say, my father broke this land. My father built this from nothing. That's legacy. That's what outlasts you. Evening comes. The sun sets in a blaze of orange and red, painting the prairie in colors you never saw in Mississippi. The sky is vast and open, stretching from horizon to horizon without obstruction. You fix yourself supper, cowpeas and cornbread. Simple food, but you cooked it yourself in a house you own on land that belongs to you. After eating, you sit outside and watch the stars appear. One by one, then dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. The Milky Way stretches across the darkness like a river of light. The prairie is quiet, just wind, just grass, just the distant call of a coyote. Tomorrow, you'll wake early, check the fields, do the endless work that farming requires. The work that never stops, never finishes, just cycles through seasons year after year. But tonight, there's rest. You go inside, light a lamp. The sadi is small and rough, but it's weatherproof now. Solid. Home. You lie down on your rope bed. The grass-stuffed mattress creaks when you move, but you're used to it now. It's comfortable in its own way. The darkness is complete once you blow out the lamp. Outside, the wind whispers through the grass. The same sound you've heard every night for 2 years. The voice of the prairie. Constant, eternal. Your breathing slows. Your body relaxes. The boundaries between waking and sleeping start to blur. You think about the 200 people in Langston, all sleeping in their own sadis, their own homes, all dreaming their own dreams. 200 people who refused to give up, who decided that freedom was worth the hardship, who chose to build something new rather than accept something old. You're one of them now, part of the story, part of the dream, And that's something. That's everything. Your mother used to say that stars were the souls of ancestors watching over you. If that's true, maybe your grandmother is up there somewhere. Maybe Obadiah's son. Maybe all the people who came before who survived slavery and war and everything else watching, hoping, believing that their children and grandchildren will have something better. You hope you're making them proud. The darkness deepens. Sleep pulls you under. The last thing you hear is the wind. Always the wind. Tomorrow it will still be there. The prairie will still be there. The work will still be there. But so will you, still standing, still fighting, still free. Let it come the darkness. Let sleep take you the way it took Josiah Freeman in his soddy on the Oklahoma prairie over 130 years ago. Let the prairie wind carry you away. Let the stars watch over you. Let your breathing slow and soften, and finally stop. You've earned this rest, this peace, this moment of stillness in a life that demands so much. Take it, rest, dream of freedom, dream of land that's yours, dream of a future that belongs to you and nobody else. Dream of home. Centuries will pass, the prairie will change, Langston will grow and shrink and transform. The Saudis will disappear, replaced by wooden houses, then brick buildings. The dirt streets will be paved. The hand-dug well will be replaced by a municipal water system. But the spirit of those first settlers, their courage, their determination, their refusal to accept less than they deserved, that will remain. In the bones of the land, in the stories passed down from generation to generation. In Langston University, still standing today, still educating students, still carrying forward the dream that Edward McCabe, Obadiah Crane, and Josiah Freeman built. And somewhere in that legacy is you. Josiah Freeman, 23 years old when you arrived, 25 now, farmer, landowner, free man, you made it, you survived, you built something real. Let that be enough. Let sleep take you now. The same deep, restful sleep that comes after a day of hard, honest work. The sleep that restores. The sleep that prepares you for tomorrow. Let it come. The wind in the grass, the smell of earth and smoke and distance. The sound of your own breathing slower now, deeper, fading into the darkness. Good night, Josiah. Good night to all who came before you and all who will come after. Good night to the dreamers and the builders and the ones who refuse to quit. Good night to Langston, Oklahoma Territory, 1892. Good night to the prairie. Good night.